So yes, welcome everybody. My name is Corbett. I am the VP Finance for the Simon Fraser Student Society, who is hosting this event. Our presenter today is Thomas. Please give yourself an introduction, and then we can get started. If anyone has any questions, please let me know in the chat. You can also, if you feel comfortable on showing your camera or not, it's totally fine either way. But it is nice to see some faces from time to time. And yeah, please go ahead, Thomas.
Thank you, Corbett. So my name is Thomas. Today I'll be presenting an Each One Teach One on the topic of RRSPs and TFSAs. Each One Teach One is a national program created to educate and empower people like yourself willing to learn these topics. I actually work for a local credit union as a wealth planner, also known as a financial planner or investment specialist. And part of the reason I joined this institution is because they prioritize financial literacy. And therefore I get to present topics such as the one today to all of you. And I often choose these topics because I wish someone would have taught me these things many years ago. What I do as a wealth planner is help people with their finances, their investments, and I help them plan essentially for the future and achieve whatever goals they may have. One goal I come across, I'd say most often, is saving for retirement or for major purchases. We live in a great country that offers many privileges. However, you shouldn't rely on the government alone to provide you with a very comfortable retirement. So to ensure you have the funds necessary to live whatever lifestyle you want, to buy whatever things you need, you usually have to plan ahead. So today I'll be talking about two types of registered accounts, which can be great vehicles in order to save. And these are the RRSP, or Registered Retirement Savings Plan, and the TFSA, or Tax-Free Savings Account. So I'm going to share a presentation here, or a PowerPoint. And hopefully you can all see it in just a moment. So it should be coming up on the screen there. If you can't see it, please let us know verbally or in the chat so we can have it fixed. But it should be a PowerPoint presentation saying RRSPs and TFSAs. And let's dive in. So usually these kinds of seminars were to take place where we're all in the same room. And this is where I'd go through some housekeeping items, such as where the bathrooms are and turn your cell phones off. But presenting virtually, the most important thing is to not cause any distractions. So try to be on mute unless you're asking a question, whether that be verbally or typing it into the chat. This is my first time presenting on Zoom specifically, so bear with me if there's any technical difficulties. And like Corbett just said, the whole presentation should be about an hour. We've left some time at the end for questions and questions throughout, because some of the topics can be quite complex. But if you do have to leave, feel free to take off. Corbett is recording this, so I'm sure you'll have access to it later. But we're going to try for an hour. I did also send today. So what will we be learning today? First off, the features and benefits of RRSPs and TFSAs, and essentially what are they? Secondly, how to decide when to invest in either of these plans, and also what kinds of investments you can put inside of them, and so much more. So let's get started. First off, let's start with the RSPs. So like I said before, it is an abbreviation which stands for Registered Retirement Savings Plan, stating here it's one of the best ways to save for your retirement. Let's talk about some of the benefits and why it is such a good way to save for retirement. So 5 benefits are listed here. I'd say the last 3 are things you can do with the RSP, whereas the first 2 are real benefits that affect you. So you can use an RSP to pay lower taxes now. You can use an RSP for tax-free growth, or also known as tax-deferred growth. There is a home buyer's plan you can partake in, as well as a lifelong learning plan. And you can also choose a type of RSP that's a spousal plan. Now I'm going to go through each of these benefits individually. Benefit number 1, pay lower taxes now. So this is, I'd say, one of the most attractive benefits of the RSP and why most people choose to engage in opening this kind of account. Here's an example in how you can pay lower taxes and how overall this system works. In this example, there's somebody who earns $40,000, let's say annually, gross income. So you work for an employer, your gross income's $40,000. With your employer, whoever handles paying you, your paychecks, will be making deductions and withholding tax before they pay you. This way, when you file your taxes, if your employer did a good job anticipating the tax you'll have to pay, then you shouldn't actually owe anything to the government because your employer actually withheld everything necessary. Now, if you open up an RSP and you make a contribution, in this case, they contribute $1,000, effectively, you can use that $1,000, deduct it from your taxable income, effectively making it $39,000, and you'd get a tax refund. Now, in BC, when you're earning income, you have to pay income tax, and those tax rates are both federal and provincial. So there's a total tax between the 2 rates that you'll pay. Making $40,000, your tax bracket should be about 20%. So that is why when you contribute $1,000, leaving all other variables aside, you'll actually get a tax refund of $200. With this example, it starts to become clear that RSPs serve a very specific purpose, and they're not actually for everybody at a certain time. You will benefit most from an RSP when you are in a high tax bracket. If you're making little to no income, RSPs may not make sense at all. So I remember for myself, I went to UVic, and as a student, I was making little to no income because I was just working during the summers. I did not partake in an RSP because I wasn't paying tax. I had tuition credits that would get me refunds already, so an RSP didn't make sense for me then. But we sometimes get this notion driven into us that you need an RSP no matter what age, no matter your situation, but it's not actually the case. There's a lot of rules around an RSP, and like I said, they serve a very specific purpose. I'd say about 20 years ago, there was this shift with employers to phase out and move away from the sort of pensions and the retirement benefits sponsored by an employer that would take care of you in your retirement. So as employers stepped away from defined benefit pension plans, where you'd be guaranteed an annual amount when you retire, a lot of people thought, oh gosh, I definitely have to focus on myself and my retirement. So I know my parents told me I needed an RSP when I was 17, which I did not. Nowadays, like when you're earning income and you don't have those sort of tuition credits available, then it should start to make sense, but it doesn't always. This sort of tax saving strategy can be confusing. At this time, are there any questions? And if not, feel free to ask them later on as well. So I'll move on to benefit number 2. Tax-free growth. You'll notice that the growth is tax-free, but what's most important when thinking about an RSP is that you are going to be taxed at some point. So in the previous example, they contributed $1,000. They can invest that $1,000 into several different kinds of investments that may grow. They may grow by means of interest, by capital gains, by dividends, but that can grow, and it will grow inside the RSP without being taxed. However, there will come a time when money will come out of your RSP, and every dollar that comes out is going to be added to your taxable income. So a lot of people just have that sort of short-term benefit in focus, where they know they'll contribute to an RSP, they'll get a tax refund hopefully, but they don't realize that there'll come a time when you need to withdraw that, and you better hope that when you do withdraw it, you're in a lower tax bracket than when you contributed it. Otherwise, you kind of defeated the whole purpose of the RSP. So in a nutshell, you are progressing through your career, earning different amounts of income. When you are peaking with that kind of income and that tax bracket, that's the time that you'll have the most benefit with an RSP. And then later in life, when you retire, generally your income goes down and you withdraw from an RSP and you're in a lower tax bracket. So that's the sort of long-term strategy which is best to use an RSP for. Benefit number 3. There are 2 exceptions to withdrawing from an RSP where you won't get taxed. The first one's called a home buyer's plan. This allows you to withdraw up to $35,000 from your RSP in order to help with a down payment to purchase your first home. The amount you withdraw, any amount up to $35,000, won't be considered taxable, but you must put that money back over the span of 15 years, a repayment schedule that the government will set up and inform you of. If you don't follow their schedule, whatever you withdrew is going to be considered income. So you have to be careful. This type of plan, when you take the money out, it has to be for your principal residence, meaning the home that you buy or the down payment you put on the home, it has to be the house that you actually live in. And you must be considered a first-time home buyer. Any questions about that at the moment? Nothing showing up, okay. Now there's another way to get money out, and that's called the lifelong learning plan. So you can withdraw up to $20,000 out of an RSP for education purposes with no tax penalty. And instead of 15 years repayment, you have 10 years to pay that back. It can be used for yourself or an eligible spouse. To be honest, I'd only recommend engaging in either of these kinds of withdrawals as a last resort. Otherwise, keep your RSP alone, keep those funds inside for the purpose of your retirement, if you can. That way you don't have to engage in some tedious repayment schedule, and whatever you invest in your RSP, you can say that's for the long term, I'm not going to touch it, and it can grow more, essentially. However, we do live in an area where homes are obscenely expensive, so if you do put to an RSP and don't have the capacity to get that down payment, you may not have any other choice. Another benefit to RSPs is that you can open a specific type called a spousal plan. These are a little complex, so I'll just go over it at a high level. So if you have an eligible spouse, so that would mean that you're married or you're in a common law relationship, and let's say that you make a lot more money than your spouse, and that's likely to be the case throughout your lives, then you can use your RSP contribution room, put money into a spousal RSP held by your spouse, and when it comes time to withdraw long down the road, the withdrawals will be taxed in your spouse's name, in your spouse's tax bracket, which we assume will be much lower than yours. That's the plan of it all. This can be a very confusing concept, and there are quite a few added rules with this kind of RSP. So I recommend definitely talking with a financial planner if you feel something like this would benefit you. And these days, instead of using a spousal plan, it also helps just to get a good accountant if you're married to see what's available in terms of income splitting and spreading your income between you and your spouse, which is a really great way to lower your tax costs as well. Well, that's what I'll touch upon for the spousal RSPs. Now, let's talk about what you can put inside an RSP. A lot of people don't realize you can actually invest into all of these things inside of an RSP. That's why there's a picture of an umbrella there. So you can think of an RSP as an umbrella or as a bucket, any kind of metaphor you like, which can hold all sorts of stuff. So listed here, you can have a savings account, you can have term deposits, GICs, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, all sorts of stuff. Now, at my credit union, and whatever bank or credit union you bank at, you'll have the option to open up basic RSP. And when you do that, they'll automatically put high interest savings inside of it for you. That's very common. That's sort of the most basic kind of RSP you can have. And from there, instead of just having it all in savings, you can have it in term deposits or GICs. Just know that term deposits and GICs are interchangeable terms. They're the same thing. Credit unions just use the term deposits. Banks often use GICs. What they are guaranteed investments. So you'll decide how long you can lock something in for. Let's say it's 1 year, and then you can engage in a GIC or a term deposit, and they'll guarantee you a rate of return if you hold it for that long. Unfortunately, these days, those sort of guaranteed rates are, I'd say, worse than I've ever seen them in my career. They were decent before the pandemic, but things have really dropped since March. So to give you an example, if you lock in for a year, banks and credit unions will probably only guarantee you 1 to 1.2% unless there's promotions going on. Whereas the average, it should be closer to 2. So hopefully rates return back to normal. You can also put mutual funds in stocks. Both are market-based investments and your values are going to fluctuate, so there's no guarantees there. But with an RSP, it's assumed that your time horizon or when you plan on withdrawing the funds is your retirement. So if you have a time horizon of 10, 20, 30 years, usually those sort of market-based investments like mutual funds or ETFs can offer you much more in terms of a rate of return, but you got to be comfortable with the risk associated with it. So when you go into market-based investments, it's great to have an advisor on your side, or at least a sort of platform that takes you through the process and explains everything for you. So those are the kinds of investments you can put inside. And let's talk about quickly the RSP contribution rooms. So, oh, great question from Charlene. A mutual fund allows the average investor like you and me to get into a pool of stocks and bonds, and it just makes it very accessible to the average Canadian. If you have an RSP and you wanted individual stocks, so you wanted companies that you liked, like Apple, Google, Tesla, and all these companies that you thought were going to do good, you would need thousands of dollars in order to diversify, because some of those stocks are very expensive. With a mutual fund, you can have all of those companies, but only need to contribute 50 bucks a month, and you'd have access to it all. So a mutual fund's essentially a pooled asset where they have risk tolerances that cater to all sorts of investors. So a mutual fund can be very low risk or conservative, a very high risk or aggressive, and everywhere in between. And inside a mutual fund is usually 100 to 120 different kinds of investments that make up a portfolio that caters to your specific risk. So if you ever want to talk about mutual funds and you've never invested into them before, I'd recommend talking to your bank or credit union, because they'll have advisors like myself who can first figure out what kind of investor you are, what your goals are for the savings that you have, and then determine whether mutual funds or stocks, or there's even another one called an ETF or an exchange traded fund, that they may be suitable. So there's a bunch of different platforms out there. So there are some that you can actually have full control and do everything yourself. But as a first-time investor, I'd highly recommend just talking to a wealth planner and getting the information first. Any other questions about investments at the moment? Okay, so moving on, the RSP contribution room, everyone has a different room, so it's specific to you. In that previous example, it mentioned that the person was making $40,000 a year. A contribution room is determined by taking the income that you've earned, multiplying it by 18%, and the government will then calculate that for you and tell you what you get. So with 40,000, 18% would be 7,200. So that would be added to your RSP contribution room for that year. There is a maximum. So it says here in 2018, it was 26,230. In the last couple of years, it's grown, so it's over $27,000 now. But in order to get that maximum, if you think of that as 18%, you would need to make probably about 150,000 or 140 to be able to get that maximum available. So it takes quite a bit. But whatever amount you get, you're going to get 18% added as RSP contribution room. There's no actual age limit for an RSP, so as long as you're earning income and filing your taxes, you're going to have an RSP contribution limit. My suggestion, which if I don't forget, I'll put into the chat later on, is for everyone to get a login for the CRA, or Canada Revenue Agency's My Account for Individuals is what it's called online. It's a fantastic resource. The government of Canada has gotten quite digital, so you can log in, see your RSP room, see your TFSA room, see all of your tax filings, all of your notice of assessments, see all the government benefits to you and when they're scheduled, so you can see your childcare benefits, your GST that comes quarterly as a return. It tells you everything, so if you don't have those logins, I highly recommend it. It makes life a lot easier. The government is the one that's going to penalize you if you over-contribute to an RSP or TFSA. So if you are contributing, get the information from them. When you're talking to a bank or credit union, those staff do not know what your contribution limit is. Only you can access that information. So you have to either get it online, which is easiest, or call the government. I can make assumptions based on how much you make and other variables, but I don't know for sure because government doesn't give that kind of information out. All right, so that's all we have for RSPs. There's a few other topics later, but now we'll move on to TFSAs. If you have any other RSP questions, feel free to pop them into the chat or let me know, but I'll move on to TFSAs now. Here's a true and false. So we don't have a poll on this presentation, so just think of the answer in your head. Tax-free savings accounts are really for the rich and for people who max out their RSPs. True or false? I find the wording quite strange. And even if I didn't know the answer, I'd lean towards false, which it is. So tax-free savings are for everybody. We've gone through quite a few slides with RSPs, and as you can see, there's a lot of rules when it comes to RSPs, and they do serve a very specific purpose. TFSAs, on the other hand, not so many rules. They're quite fantastic. At times it's hard to believe that they're out there, but let's dive in and talk about what they offer. What is a tax-free savings account? So like an RSP, a tax-free savings account is also a good way to save for retirement, but the way taxes work on it are very different. And I'd say that's the biggest differentiator. Benefits of a TFSA include flexibility, convenience, tax efficiency, and it's non-disruptive. Let's see if we can go into these individually. So a tax-free savings account is flexible in that you can use it to save for anything. Even though the word retirement isn't in the name, you can absolutely use a TFSA to save for your retirement. When I was talking about RSPs before, as a student, if you're not earning money or not much money, RSPs may not make sense. Absolutely use a TFSA and put money in there, which can have multiple goals. You can have as many RSPs and TFSAs as you like. You can have an RSP and TFSA at one bank, another bank, 5 banks. It doesn't matter as long as you stay within your limit, because the government has a bird's eye view of all your accounts, and cumulatively, you'd better not exceed that limit. But you can have as many accounts as you want. If you only had one account, like I only have one TFSA and a lump sum of money in there, that sum of money has different goals. So some of that money is going to be used for shorter term goals, other for longer term goals. You can have one TFSA, but many different kinds of investments within it based on what you're going to be using that stuff for. So here it says use a TFSA for a car, a house, for your education, vacation, bills, anything, essentially anything. It's a great kind of account. The TFSA offers convenience. So you can withdraw anytime. And as the name suggests, that money will come out tax-free, so no tax consequences. And whatever you withdraw, let's say you have a TFSA filled with $10,000 at the moment, and you needed car repairs and withdrew $3,000. The following year, whatever you withdrew, that room comes right back again. So not only is it coming out tax-free and there's no tax consequences, but there's no consequences when it comes to losing your TFSA room. The RSP, on the other hand, if you withdraw from an RSP and it's not part of the home buyer's plan or the lifelong learning plan, you lose that RSP room forever. Not only are you going to get taxed on the entire amount that comes out, but you're not going to be able to recontribute that amount. You've just lost it. So RSPs, if you're contributing, make sure you're not going to need that money at all down the road. The next benefit, TFSAs are tax efficient. So this is where it's kind of hard to believe. It's often with newcomers to Canada that they don't understand that there is no tax associated with it, because not many countries offer anything like this. So a TFSA, you put your money in, you choose your kind of investment, and it will grow, hopefully. all of that growth will grow tax-free, no tax at all, and you can withdraw the whole thing and never pay a cent in tax. You don't even get a statement at the end of the year for what you've withdrawn because the government doesn't care what you have withdrawn because it's all coming out tax-free. So very flexible, very tax efficient, fantastic kind of plan. A TFSA is also non-disruptive. So this means that those withdrawals that are coming out tax-free are not actually impacting any sort of other benefits you are taking out. So I would say this mainly applies to people who have retired and who are over 65 years old. So with the demographic of you folks may not be applicable. But when you're 65 and you're getting these different sort of government benefits that are income tested, which means that if you make too much income, your benefit gets erased or you don't get anything. Pulling from a tax-free savings, since it's all coming out tax-free, doesn't affect any of those benefits at all. So you can supplement your income with stuff in a TFSA and still get all those sort of income tested benefits that are coming from the government. So great in that regard as well. But the RRSP, your contribution room was based off of a formula, a calculation, which was specific to you. A TFSA, on the other hand, is the same for every Canadian. So there's a set standard, it's a flat rate for contribution rooms across the country. Now, some of you may not have the full contribution room available. So, oops, at the bottom here, it says lifetime contribution as of this year is $69,500, but that is only the case if you are turning 29 this year. Otherwise, you won't have the full room accessible. Another great place to get it is that CRA My Account for individuals. That the government will tell you right away what your TFSA contribution room is. There's a question, what's the benefit of having multiple TFSA accounts? Good question, Alicia. I like myself to keep everything under one roof. I much prefer it that way. Oh, Charlene, the audio isn't working sometimes. Oh yeah, if you miss anything, please let me know. I'll move the computer closer just to be safe. But that's not a good sign if it's cutting in and out. Some people have multiple TFSAs because some institutions offer TFSAs that can specifically hold one type of investment, whereas other institutions hold another. So let's say you have a goal to buy a car, but you also want to use your TFSA for retirement. Now, you can open up a basic TFSA with your bank or credit union and have those GICs or term deposits, and you know that that's very safe. And you use that to purchase a car within 2 to 3 years because you don't want to put that into the market because let's say you opened a TFSA this February, invested into a mutual fund or some stocks, hoping to buy a car in 2 years, and then the pandemic hit. You may not recover from that within 2 years when you need to buy that car. So a mutual fund may not make sense. So you have one TFSA at your bank in very safe investments, but then you want a TFSA that is for a longer goal, like retirement, and you have that with another institution that only offers mutual funds. So sometimes you need multiple plans because of the kinds of investments that are offered. Not every TFSA offers all of these investments. So sometimes you have to go from one institution to another. So I hope the fading in doesn't happen too much moving forward. If there's anything missed, hopefully the recording can give that sort of clarity and going back to it. But I'll try and articulate as best I can. You'll notice that on this page, the kinds of investments inside the TFSA that are available are exactly the same as the RSP. So all these kinds of investments options you can have in a TFSA, you can have an RRSP. If you're saving for a child's education, there's another registered account called an RESP, or Registered Education Savings Plan. And you can do it without any sort of registered account. So you can do it outside of all of that and simply pay tax as it grows. However, might as well use something like a TFSA, because why not get the growth tax-free? Any other questions about tax-free savings accounts at the moment? All right, so here's the two accounts set side by side, some similarities, some differences. Actually, no, this is just the investments within it. They're exactly the same. I'm not sure why with the TFSA it has normal savings account. You can absolutely have an RSP with a normal savings account as well. The original slide actually had that, but the types of investments you can put into either are exactly the same. Here's a compare and contrast a little bit. So a tax-free savings account versus an RSP. The downside of a TFSA, because I made it sound really great, is that your contributions that you make, those contributions cannot be used to deduct from your taxable income. So you're simply getting income, you're paying tax on it, you're using that you've received to put into a TFSA. You're not getting that tax deduction. However, this investment's growing tax-free and it's coming out tax-free. If you are in a high tax bracket, there is certainly a benefit to using an RSP to get that tax deduction, because you are saving on tax today, getting that tax refund today. That's money back from the government today, which is better than tomorrow. And you can use that tax refund to put back into your investments and further your assets and grow your net worth a lot quicker. So when the RSP is used right, it is fantastic. And you do get the tax deduction. So TFSA, no tax deduction, RSP you do. Withdrawals, TFSA, all the withdrawals are tax exempt. RSPs, they are absolutely not, unless you are using a home buyer's plan or a lifelong learning plan. Spousal plan, there's only such thing as a spousal RSP, no such thing as a spousal TFSA. A TFSA has to be in your name and your name alone. It cannot be, say, yours for the benefit of a child, or like it can't be, it has to be your account. So you can certainly put money inside for the benefit of someone else, but it has to be run by you and only accessible by you. When you turn 71, this wasn't mentioned before, but I was mentioning at some point with an RSP, you actually have to withdraw, whether you like it or not. And that starts at 71 when you actually have to convert an RSP into a type of plan that will force withdrawals. No choice in that matter. So in the year you turn 72, withdrawals will have to start out of an RSP, although they do start quite minimally. So if you don't say need the money, you can withdraw the minimum mandatory withdrawal amount. At the age of 72, it's basically saying your account is worth this size, you're forced to withdraw 5.4%, and that percentage goes up year over year, and you're forced to withdraw. No such thing as a TFSA. Leave the money in there as long as you want. You don't have to touch it. You're not forced to touch it at any point. So that's a bit of a compare and contrast to the two. True or false? Again, think of this answer in your head before I spill it. With interest rates so low, which yes, very topical, it doesn't make sense to invest in a TFSA, since there won't be any interest to get tax-free anyway. So think about that for a sec. Interest rates are certainly low right now. That's false. So with any type of account, it benefits you to contribute early on and to contribute regularly, no matter what, because in a couple examples ahead, they are showing low tax or low interest rates, but there's still going to be growth over time. So what do I mean? Let's compare an investment that gives you 1.5% annually and another one that gives you 2.5% annually, so a difference of 1%. This kind of return would be generally what a high interest savings or a term deposit or GIC would guarantee you. So in this example, someone is investing $1,000 every year for 31 years into a GIC or term deposit that is offering either 1.5 or 2.5%. At the end of 31 years, you've contributed $31,000 yourself, but the value of the plan is $39,166 if you're getting 1.5% every year. So what you've earned is $8,166. If you had that all within a TFSA, you would get that $8,000 plus tax-free. You just earn that money without any tax consequences. Now, if there was an added percent during that entire time, instead of 39,000 plus some change, you'd have 46,000. So the actual interest earned is getting close to double, even though there was only a 1% difference. So the interest you earned in that example was 15,220. Again, if that was within a TFSA, that would have been entirely tax-free that you earned that money. Those are quite low in terms of returns. If you did have a 31-year time horizon when you weren't going to be using those funds and you used, say, other types of investments with higher returns, it's simply exponential. So in that amount of time, it would, when you keep adding 1% on top of that, the interest or capital gains earned would just kind of skyrocket in a sense. So that's the power of compounding. If I start putting money into my RSP when I'm 20 years old, then stop. I'll be better off than if I wait until I'm 35 to start, even if I put more money when I'm 35. It's a bit of a confusing question. So this person is thinking, do I start contributing a smaller amount at 20, which would give me a longer time where I could be investing a longer period? Or do I wait till I'm 35 and invest a larger amount when I have more capacity to save? So in this case, they're leaning towards waiting, or sorry, they're leaning towards starting early, and it's true. So the longer period you have to contribute, the better off you generally are. So that sort of exponential growth, if you think about an exponential graph, which starts with minimal sort of projection or increase and then gets steeper and steeper, the longer sort of time, the longer you'll be in that sort of steep curve, and it really gets exponential towards the end. So the longer you have to contribute, the better. So here's this example with some numbers. So Emma is going to be the one that starts early at age 20. She's investing $2,000 a year into something that gets her 1.5% until she's 35. When she is, let's see, then at 35, she stops those contributions. So 20 to 35, $2,000 a year, a term deposit getting 1.5%. Jason, also getting the same rate of return. He waits until he's 35, then gets an RSP and contributes $3,000 a year for 10 years. wanting to catch up to what Emma had. Remember, Emma was in for 15 years. Jason's only in for 10. The winner essentially is Emma by a long shot, having that longer period. Even though she put $1,000 less, she did have more time to put that money in. So they contributed the same amount of money. So they each contributed $30,000, but Emma did it over a longer time period, which gave her more room for growth. So those last 5 years really had that exponential growth and gave her 38,789 versus Jason's 32,000. Oh, sorry, saying it cut out again. So here I'm just looking at comparing those scenarios. So Jason versus Emma. Emma has a longer time period to contribute. And as a result, with that exponential growth, having those extra 5 years gave her the interest earn of $8,789 versus Jason only investing 10 years, getting $2,123. So it's that power of compounding again. Emma invested the same amount, but just spread it out over longer and got substantially more. So from Justin, isn't investing in an RSP early counteractive to the advice earlier that we should invest in an RSP that we're in a high tax bracket? Very good point. So with Emma, this would, or with both, I should say, I would only recommend this. I would absolutely only recommend this if they were in higher tax brackets. With this example, I would change it to a TFSA, especially with Emma being 20. Although you never know what someone's financial situation is. Likely your income's not going to be high. So for that sort of RSP rule where you should only be investing if you are earning an income. If you're not, RSPs do not make sense for sure. Or if you're not making a lot of income. So with these, we can definitely think of them as a TFSA instead, because it doesn't specify their income and we don't actually know what benefit they're getting from it or what kind of tax deductions are happening and what kind of tax refunds they're getting. But again, thank you, Justin, to clarify, RSPs only make sense when you are making money. So some free money. Next up, if you have the capacity to save, I recommend doing it. It can sometimes feel like, especially when you're a student and maybe your income's very minimal, it may feel like saving, $15 every couple of weeks or, $50 a month if you can. When you project it out, it may seem like that's not going to amount to much, but I highly suggest doing whatever you can, whatever's within your capacity, because maybe you're not saving much, but you are establishing a habit, which I'd say is most important. So when I was going to UVic, I was horrible with my money, but if I had that sort of habit in place and was having that sort of schedule of whenever I did get money, paying yourself first is a great rule to think of, and putting what you can aside. When you do have the capacity later in life to save a bunch, your habit is already in place. So all you got to do is increase the amounts. You don't have to establish this kind of habit. Wherever you're banking, bank or credit union, you probably have a checkings. I want you to know that you can have as many savings accounts as you want. And these are just regular, non-registered savings. You can use those, you can rename the accounts for whatever And we're back. You can, like I said, have as many RRSPs and TFSAs as you want. You can ask your bank or credit union to set up those automatic contributions going into it, whether it's bi-weekly or monthly. Choose whatever frequency you like, and just be careful of your contribution limits. So I'm going to put into the chat the CRA website I was referring to. So that's the CRA My Account for Individuals. If you've never registered, it used to be a tedious process, but now I think they've made it a bit easier. So you can use a bank or credit union online banking login to help you get through that process. You can use your BC Services card, or you can simply register with a username and answer whatever questions they have. That's a great site to have. And I believe that wraps up the presentation. We did cover a lot. There's certainly quite a few rules with those types of registered plans. We talked about the benefits. We've got into a bit of how to decide which one's best for you and the kind of things you can put into either of those. Are there any questions before we wrap up today's presentation? If any questions do come up later on, Corbett does have my email, so you can definitely ask him and you can forward it to me, no problem. I can even just put my email straight in here if you want to talk to me directly. So this is my work email, which you can send me questions later if you like. And there's Corbett's as well. Just one thing to ensure the ongoing each one teach ones are going okay. They did just create a survey if you have time, just to provide any feedback. Any feedback's helpful. And the survey is also in the chat right here. All right, so I don't see any questions coming. Oh, so Warren, Corbett did make the recording throughout the presentation, so we should have access to that and may forward that all to you, I presume. And yeah, so he's gonna share it. I don't see any other questions. Oh, thanks, Stephanie. Let me check. Oh, sorry about that. So does the interest change if you have multiple savings accounts with less money in each compared to if you have one with all the income? Generally, no. However, whatever's posted on a bank or credit union site is for the general public. If you are a long-term member, and especially with banks, they do like to cater to people with higher amounts of money. Sometimes you can negotiate a slightly higher rate of return for things like term deposits and GICs. For investments such as mutual funds and stocks, there's no negotiation. That's simply tied to an underlying asset, such as a company stock. But sometimes with term deposits and GICs specifically, there may be a sort of spread that the bank or credit union has. And maybe that's an advantage to have it all in one place to show that there's a larger sum of money, but effectively it shouldn't. So credit unions usually like to just give the same rate for everyone without playing that sort of favoritism to higher net worth people. But the benefit with having accounts in different places, I'd say the biggest benefit or the only reason to do that would be if, let's say a bank has a promotion, you might just open up a TFSA there or an RRSP if there's a promotion, take advantage of it and take it out. So sometimes people have multiple registered accounts just for that. But for the most part, people have multiple accounts only because one holds a term deposit and isn't allowed to have mutual funds, and the other holds mutual funds only. So that's effectively why most people would have two accounts, not to, it shouldn't affect the kind of rate of return you're getting for savings accounts. Okay, did I miss any others by chance? Not a problem. So just to respect everyone's time, I'll wrap it up here a couple minutes early. You have my email or Corbett's there if any questions do come up. But any final comments there, Corbett, before I say goodbye?
No, I just want to thank you again for presenting this meeting. As everyone said, yes, I put my email into the chat. You have put your email that if there's any questions, please send it to us. And I will be sharing the video. I will see, first I'd like to see if there's anything we do in post to like fix any audio issues, but if not, then we'll have it sent out as soon as possible. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right, looks like most people. All right, Corbett, that was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good day, and I'll probably send in another email later down the road. So, thanks.
Right, take care.